And we'll be starting in verse 1. Kind of reminds me of that song. Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Okay, John 19:1. Pilate then took Yeshua and scourged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and put a purple robe on him. And they began to come up to him and say, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and to give him slaps in the face. Pilate came out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, so you may know that I find no guilt in him." Yeshua then came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." Therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid, and he entered into the praetorium again and said to Yeshua, "Where are you from?" But Yeshua gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You do not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you, and I have the authority to crucify you?" Yeshua answered, "You would have no authority over me unless it had been given you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin." As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar." Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Yeshua out and sat down in the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was on the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." So they cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." I just realized I was supposed to start where I just ended. We covered that the last time. Okay, so we'll start in verse 16 now. So then he handed him over to them to be crucified. They took Yeshua, therefore, and went out, bearing his own cross to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. Then there they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Yeshua in between. Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It was written, "Yeshua the Nazarene, King of the Jews." Therefore many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Yeshua was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that he said, 'I am the King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Yeshua, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, and a part to every soldier, and also the tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it should be." This was to fulfill the scripture, "They divided my outer garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Therefore the soldiers did these things. But standing by the cross of Yeshua were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Yeshua then saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." From that hour, the disciple took her into his own household. And we'll stop there for the moment. Okay. We talked the last time about the people changing their allegiance publicly and saying, "We have no king but Caesar."
Yeah.
You know, Yahweh is the king of Israel. To deny that and claim a Gentile pagan king as your king is a rather radical departure. And it's a bad departure. Okay.
They didn't believe he was the Son of God.
That's true. I'm going to put something on the board that I'd heard about in the past, and I didn't quite realize how people came to this, but I figured it out, and I found a footnote in the Aramaic New Testament that confirmed what I was saying, what I was thinking. Okay.
What are you putting on the board?
I'm going to tell you, but you have to wait until I tell you.
Sorry.
Okay. The name Yeshua begins with a Y. Okay. So you have Yeshua, the Nazarene. In Hebrew, when you have the definite article, it's written as a hey before the word. So that's for the Nazarene. And then it says the King of the Jews. Well, you would expect to find a hey there, but in Hebrew they write and. So it would have read Yeshua the Nazarene and King of the Jews. Okay, and the letter Vav at the beginning of a word is the word and. You then have King of the Jews. So the Jews would again have the definite article hey for the. Okay, so when you look at this written down, you see Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. What's the name of God?
Yahweh.
Yahweh. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. So this would be one of the things that they would object to being written on the board, because it's acknowledging that He is Yahweh, King of the Jews. Okay, now they objected to it and said, just say He said He was Yahweh, which would change the whole dynamic of what's written. And Pilate probably had no idea what he'd put up there. But God did. God knew what He was doing. Okay. And He did it in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Of course, in Latin and Greek, wouldn't say anything. Okay, now there's a prophecy that says they would divide His clothes among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. That comes from Psalm 22, which we're going to look at. We're going to look at the whole Psalm 22. Does anybody remember if it ever says that David was a prophet?
I don't know about being a prophet, but he prophesied a few times, didn't he?
Well, he obviously was a prophet. And this chapter, I believe, is a tactile vision. Now, what do I mean by a tactile vision? I believe that David had a vision and he felt everything that was going on in that vision. And what he foresaw was the crucifixion of the Messiah. But when you read it, he's not saying, and this will happen. He's speaking in the first person as if it's happening to him. And that's why I say it's a tactile vision, because he's actually experiencing, in a sense, what Yeshua is experiencing.
Well, wasn't Yeshua called the Son of David?
Yes?
Maybe that's why it's so personal.
Well, it also says when, I just read it in Judges, I think it was 1 Samuel, when David was anointed, it says God put His Spirit in him.
Yes, but just because you have the Holy Spirit doesn't make you a prophet. Okay, but when you read this, when you read Psalm 22 and you really grasp what's going on, he had to be a prophet. Okay.
When it says that.
Acts chapter 2, verses 29 and 30. Fellow Israelites, I can tell you confidently that the patriarch David died and was buried, and his tomb was here to this day. But he was a prophet and knew that God had promised him on oath that He would place one of his descendants on the throne.
Okay, there you go. David was a prophet.
Thank you.
I thought I'd read that somewhere, but I couldn't recollect it.
I know it, I didn't know where.
Okay, Psalm 22, verse 1. My God, why have you forsaken me? Far from my deliverance are the words of my groaning. O my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I have no rest. Yet you are holy, O you who are enthroned upon the praises of Israel. Okay, what does he do? He talks about God being very far away. He uses the exact words that Yeshua uses on the cross. Okay? And yet, even though God is far away from him, he makes the confession, you are holy. Okay? When Yeshua is on the cross, he's completely dependent upon God. Okay? And he knows what's going on. David never went through the experience that you see in Psalm 22. At least there's no record of anything like that. Okay? Okay, verse 4. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were delivered. In you they trusted and were not disappointed. But I am a worm and not a man, a reproach of men and despised by people. All who see me sneer at me. They separate with the lip. They wag the head, saying, Commit yourself to Yahweh, let him deliver him, let him rescue him, because he delights in him. Now David did have some parallels in his life where people were sneering at him. When Absalom revolted and he was in retreat, he had a mocker following him. Okay? So he has a similar parallel in a sense, but not to the extent that this is. Verse 9. Yet you are he who brought me forth from the womb. You made me trust when upon my mother's breasts. Upon you I was cast from birth. You have been my God from my mother's womb. There's another parallel between him and Messiah. Okay? Very much. Constantly independence. Oh, what's funny is, you think about this. I was cast upon you from my mother's breasts. In other words, from birth, I've been committed to you. Okay? What is circumcision all about? It's about committing someone to God, committing them to the covenant. And when you look at David's family, he's got some real high rollers in there. Okay, you've got Ruth the Moabitess, who leaves very possibly being a pagan priestess, making a confession of faith, coming back to Israel, and becoming part of Israel. And then you have Boaz, who is an extremely honorable man, and they're right in his family line. Okay? We're not told too much about Jesse, but I dare say he's walking in the same way.
And was Boaz's mother Rahab the prostitute that hit the spies? Joshua?
That would be further back in his lineage.
Oh.
Yeah, that's not real close, but that's further back. But yeah, he does have a very strong line of faith. You would also find Tamar there. Okay, verse 11. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, for there is none to help. Many bulls have surrounded me. Strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. They open wide their mouth at me as a ravening and roaring lion. Okay, this is symbolism. Bulls and lions are symbols of powerful men who are malicious towards you. He's not actually talking about literal bulls and lions. Okay?
Yeah.
Verse 14. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. Okay, that doesn't describe anything in David's life. This describes the crucifixion, where you're hanging from your hands with all the weight pulling your joints apart, and you can't push up without pushing your foot down onto a nail. How many people here have actually fully stepped on a nail? Okay, so you know that that's not...
It wasn't a nail, it was an oyster, but it was just as bad.
Okay, so you know how bad that would hurt if you had to push up every time you wanted to breathe. Okay, it's extremely painful. I've put several nails through my feet in the past, along with other body parts. Okay. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaves to my jaws, and you lay me in the dust of death. For dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Now, I don't remember anything in David's life where that happened. No. So he's experiencing something in this vision that has never actually happened to him. And he's making a picture prophecy, just like the feasts. Verse 17. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and from my clothing they cast lots. Wow. There's your prophecy that's quoted in the text. Okay, but that never happened to David. Okay, So he's describing something that hasn't happened to him, but it's like he's lived it. Okay? Verse 19. But you, O Yahweh, be not far off. O you, my help, hasten to my assistance. Deliver my soul from the sword, my only life from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth, from the horns of the wild ox, you answer me. I will tell of your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly I will praise you. You who fear Yahweh, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, glorify him, and stand in awe of him, all of you descendants of Israel. For he has not despised nor hated the affliction of the afflicted, nor has he hidden his face from him. But when he cried out to him for help, he heard. From you comes my praise in the great assembly. I shall pay my vows before those who fear him. The afflicted will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek him will praise Yahweh. Let your heart live forever. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to Yahweh, and all the families of the nations will worship before you. For the kingdom is Yahweh's, and he rules over the nations. All the prosperous of the earth will eat and worship. All those who go down to the dust will bow before him, even he who cannot keep his soul alive. Or, more accurately, even he who did not keep his soul alive. Okay, so even though he's facing death, he's looking forward. Okay, again, good evidence for the fact that they knew the resurrection would take place. Okay, it's not constantly brought up in the Old Testament about life after death, but it is brought up, and it is there, and very clearly so, even as far back as Job.
Did David realize what he was describing, or do you think he just wrote down what the Spirit told him to write and didn't really know?
Have to wait to ask him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could speculate on that, but when I see him, I will ask him that.
Okay.
I'm the oldest, I'll go first.
Verse 30. And notice how he's describing the whole earth coming to faith. Well, that goes right along with the servant songs of Isaiah. The Messiah is going to come. He's going to reach out to the entire world, not just to the nation of Israel. Verse 30. Posterity will serve him. It will be told of the Lord to the coming generation. They will come and will declare his righteousness to a people who will be born, that he has performed it. Okay, so he's talking about the crucifixion, which is going to be righteousness, and that righteousness is going to go out to people. Okay, now, the death of Messiah provides us a way and an access to God and being part of his family. What comes right after Psalm 22?
Psalm 23rd Psalm.
Very good. Psalm 23. Psalm 22 makes Psalm 23 possible. And Psalm 23 says, Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay, when we read in the New Covenant, or Brit Hadashah, who is the shepherd?
Jesus.
Yeah, I am the good shepherd. Okay? Again, a connection between who is Yeshua? He's Yahweh. Okay? Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. All of that is only made possible because the Messiah has paved the way for us. God can't bless us in our natural state. But even before the Messiah dies, God knows what he's going to do. And the people can rely upon what he's going to do, not just what he has done. Okay, so when they read Psalm 22, it provides the path so that they can trust God to provide for them out of love and be their shepherd. Verse 6, surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever.
So
Okay.
when Yeshua said, I am the good shepherd, he was thinking of Psalm 23 and the fulfillment of it?
I don't know if that's what he was thinking about, but that certainly is the case. Yahweh is referred to as a shepherd over Israel in a number of places, not just Psalm 23.
Yeah, I know.
So, anyway, back to John 19. Okay. And we'll pick up in verse 26. A son has obligations to his family. And notice how conscientious Yeshua is. He's on the cross, while on the cross, in extreme pain and blood loss and weakness, okay, he takes care of his mother. He's a good son. A good Jewish boy always looks after his mother.
That's right.
Jim.
Honor your father and mother.
Yeah. So and again, he says the disciple whom Jesus loved. It's talking about John. John never names himself. He always refers to himself in some oblique manner. Okay, and yet we know that he's the author. Verse 28. After this, Yeshua, knowing that all things had already been accomplished to fulfill the scripture, said, I am thirsty. A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge full of the sour wine upon a branch of hyssop and brought it to his mouth. Therefore, when he received the sour wine, he said, It is finished, and he bowed his head and gave up the spirit. Now, if you remember, at the Passover, he said, I won't drink of the fruit of the vine again until I drink it anew with you in the kingdom. Okay, this isn't really a drink. This is like, how many have been in the hospital and had to have your mouth swabbed out because you can't really brush your teeth or anything?
I remember that's what they did.
Yeah, well, that's basically what's happening. He's got a sponge with just enough moisture on it to wet his whistle, as they say. And if you remember back in Psalm 22, what does he say? He says, my tongue is cleaving to my mouth. Okay, he's reached the point where he really can't talk. But he needs a little moisture so that he can get out the last thing he has to say, which is, it is finished. The word for finished there is teleo. Okay? And it means paid in full. It's what they wrote on a mortgage when it was paid. Teleo.
T-U-L-O?
T-E-L-E-O.
T-E-L.
Teleo.
Teleo.
Okay, now if you look it up, it's going to say something, I'm not sure if I have this right, tetelestimai.
Yeah.
In other words, in Greek, they add a lot of things in and out, just like Hebrew. Okay, so it's not going to say teleo, that's the root word. Okay, but it's what they used for writing on a mortgage when it was paid off. It's paid in full, it's finished. And that's what he's saying. He's not saying it's just that I'm finished doing my work. He's saying my death has paid the debt in full. And what is the debt? In Greek, people talk about transgressions. So you have two versions of the Lord's Prayer. You have Luke's version, which says, forgive us our transgressions as we forgive our transgressors, or those who transgress against us. That's talking about stepping across the law. But in Judaism, when you step across the law, you incur a debt. You now have a debt owed to God. Okay? So in Matthew, he says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. He's not talking about money. I mean, it will include money. But it's you've created a debt against me by sinning against me. We all owe God a great debt for our sinfulness. Okay? And Yeshua is saying, I've paid your debt. There's a great story. I think it was in World War I. Tsar Nicholas was out in the front lines and he was touring some of the camps. And there was a man who was a commander who had gambled away not only all of his money, but was deeply in debt. Had no way to pay it. And he was looking at the debts on his desk, and he was drinking rather heavily. And he had his gun out, and he was going to kill himself. But he dozed off. And as he was sleeping in his chair, waiting to kill himself, Tsar Nicholas walked into his tent. Thank you. He walked into his tent, saw the man there with the gun in his hand, saw the debts on the table, and knew what was going on. And he sat down and he wrote, paid in full, Tsar Nicholas II. He understood the principle that Yeshua paid our debts, and he was going to pay this man's debts to save his life. Okay.
And later, his life was taken away from him.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start up again next time on verse 31, rather than pushing it, because there are things I'd like to go into more that I'd rather spend more time on.
Okay.
So we'll start John 19:31.
Don't miss next week's exciting episode.
Well, actually, it'll probably be the week after, but that's okay. Same time, same station,
There it is.
you know.
One interesting
Could you
thing to
move
note
your
about
head so I
the
can
Psalm
get those?
22, one interesting thing to note about the Psalm 22 thing is today we have an enumerated Bible. We say turn to Psalm 22. The way that names were traditionally given was the first key words or the first line of a book or a psalm. So these are the words which Moses spoke, Devarim, which is what we know as Deuteronomy. So in order to say, read Psalm 22, you would say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because that's the first line of the psalm. So he's actually pointing exactly to this is what's happening. Go read this.
Okay.